It is India's Independence Day today. So, first of all, to all my Indian listeners, Happy Independence Day. I've got some wonderful surprises for you this week, so keep following this podcast. I'll bring some really interesting books which talk about India but from different perspectives. For example, starting with Pranay's book Indica, a deep natural history of the Indian subcontinent, which, as the title shows, talks about the natural history of India. So, in the context of the story of India that we are going to discuss today, we really start with the Big Bang, which you probably know took place around 14 billion years ago. And probably you also know that until around 5 billion years ago, there was no earth and there was no sun. That is where this book, Indica, it begins. It begins from the very beginning of the universe. So, as I was saying, for billions of years, that is, after the Big Bang, generations of stars, it lived and died. And in this cosmic churning, eventually, our sun, it was born. It was born around 4.6 billion years ago. At that time, it was nothing but just a giant body of dust and rocks, and energy was just coming out of it. Similarly, when Earth was born, which was around 4.56 billion years ago, just like the other newly formed planets, it was just a hot ball of iron and it spun around the sun. Mind you, in that early phase, there were around 20 infant planets. And they were just randomly moving around the sun. They haven't really settled. Which means the gravitational pull of the planets and the sun wasn't quite stable. So the movement of these really young planets, it was quite erratic. Slowly and slowly, which literally took millions and millions of years, rather billions of years, and then everything stabilized, life evolved on different parts of the earth, and that's where we are. There's an interesting thing that I found in this book where the author talks about Nigel Calder's comparison of 4.6 billion years of the journey of Earth with a 46-year-old woman. Here's what he says. So imagine the 4.6 billion year old Earth to be a 46-year-old woman. Each year of her life is actually a mega century, that is 100 million years. The first 7 of those years are completely lost to the biographer. That is, we don't know much about it. But the deeds of her later childhood are to be seen in old rocks in Greenland and South Africa. Like human memory, the surface of our planet distorts the record, emphasizing more recent events and letting the rest pass into vagueness, or at least into unimpressive joints in worn-down mountain chains. Most of what we recognize on Earth, including all substantial animal life, is the product of the past 6 years of the lady's life. She flowered literally in her middle age. Her continents were quite bare of life until she was getting on for 42, and flowering did not appear until she was 45, just 1 year ago. In the middle of last week, in Africa, some man like apes turned into ape like men, and at the weekend, Mother Earth began shivering with the latest series of ice ages. Just over 4 hours, they have elapsed since a new species calling itself Homo sapiens started chasing the other animals, and in the last 4 hours, it has invented agriculture and settled down. A quarter of an hour ago, Moses led his people to safety across a crack in Earth's shell, and about 5 minutes later, Jesus was preaching on a hill farther along the fault line. Just 1 minute has passed out of Mother Earth's 46 years since man began his industrial revolution 3 human lifetimes ago. So just think about it, how geological time, how vast that is. It's really difficult to make sense of it, to even imagine millions of years or billions of years. We can't really do that. Still, we can try, and that's what we are going to do here. So coming back to the story of Earth, when in the early phase it was just a giant ball rotating around the sun. It was not really stable, it was moving, not in its well-defined path as it does today, but more erratically. A number of collisions were also taking place. Asteroids were striking. So the size of the Earth, that was also constantly changing. So eventually what happened was a mass of dust and rock, it circled the Earth, and at that point it looked like something like the Saturn's ring. Some of them Earth pulled back due to its gravity, and some of them really formed another giant ball of around 3200 kilometer width, and that is how the moon came into existence. So at that time it was just around 64,000 kilometers away from Earth, and then it further drifted away and away, and you know where it is today. Fortunately, it wasn't that close to the Earth at that time. Had it been the case, it would have crashed onto the Earth and probably destroyed it to a large extent. And besides, we wouldn't have any moon to see if that was the case. But that's how it went. So moon moved away, and eventually the Earth's spin, it kind of settled down, it slowed, and the moon, it went further away, and it also settled and started rotating around the Earth in a more settled way. On the other hand, the different collisions that were taking place earlier with the celestial bodies, that continued. So that really once again changed the geology of the Earth. A lot of metals and different liquids and gases, they were released in the process. But there's more important thing that happened because of these collisions. We believe, and I'm saying this, we believe because that is the hypothesis scientists propose today, even though this has been challenged. But still, this is the belief that because of these asteroids and meteors, some of them brought tiny crystals of ice along with them. And as they entered Earth's atmosphere and hit the ground, the heat from the collision, it liberated this ice and converted this ice into waters and water vapors. And that's how we found water here. As I said, this is one of the main theories that have been postulated as to suggest how water came to the Earth. But based on the evidence that we have today, it seems likely that it came from the outer world. And once water came on the earth, the evolution of life or the starting of life, it became visible. So as the geology settled further, we got oceans on the earth, and they also kind of stabilized when, because of moon's gravitational pull, the tides kind of settled. And at the same time, moon on numerous occasions acted as a shield to protect earth from other celestial bodies. When you look at the moon, you can see certain scars, and they were formed because of the collision with the meteors and meteorites, and which were headed in the direction of earth, but they got deflected because instead of coming to earth, they got crashed onto the moon. So that is how it has helped our planet. Also, at that time, both the earth and the moon, they were really hot, and it was going to take another billion or so years for them to cool down. So because of that, they were red in color, but eventually as they cooled down, we got a lot of water, which, as I said, formed different water bodies including oceans. And that is when the really, really basic forms of life that came into existence. And how did that happen? I will talk about it in the next episode.